Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX3, and EX3 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be the brand new Aegisdramon deck. So Aegisdramon is the latest evolution in terms of playstyle for the source splitting subtheme that Blue likes to play around with. So you're just trying to line up your inheritable with on-play effects to be able to split them apart and be able to gain various benefits for those on-play abilities, allowing you to do lots of different things depending on what your stack is looking like and the cards you're looking to incorporate into the deck. Even though this isn't going to be like a tier 1 hyper meta competitive deck, it's still a fun casual deck to play around with that could take the opponent by surprise with the amount of swarm potential the deck has and disruptive capabilities Aegisdramon brings to the table. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Bukamon. So this is the BT7 version of Bukamon, and it's the only Digitama that's actually playing around with this subtheme. So by default, it's just the best choice, and it's actually pretty good at being able to help us gain some extra memory when we're splitting apart our inheritables, so that way we could try to make more tempo efficient plays and more powerful plays possible. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Syakomon. So Syakomon is in the deck just because it's one of the Floodgate rookies that Blue has to be playing around with, and even though its Floodgate potential isn't necessarily super relevant, so it is kind of a flex spot in the deck, it still could come up and matter in case the opponent is trying to reduce the cost of their evolutions, which this card prevents. But I'm also going to be running 4 copies of ModokiBetamon for that same similar style of reasoning, acting as another rookie floodgate. This one is just a little bit more important to how the meta currently is, just because there's a lot of memory manipulating shenanigans going around, and ModokiBetamon basically stops that on all turns. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gomamon. So this is the BT7 version of Gomamon, and he's a pretty good card to want to split apart from our inheritables because that will then trigger his on-play ability to be able to allow us to draw 2 cards for some added consistency. But the most important rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Crabmon. So this Crabmon is really powerful just because by default his on-play ability gives our Digimon jamming, which allows our Digimon swings to be as safe as they possibly can be. And on top of that, if he was split apart from an inheritable source, then we get to reload our inheritable sources with a blue level 5 or lower Digimon from our hand, which is pretty decent at allowing us to try to rake our stack with the types of cards that we want and need to be able to keep our stack healthy and full when we're going to be splitting apart our Digimon. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tobiumon. So Tobiumon is kind of a flex spot for the deck. I'm using him solely for his tempo just because he's an easy level 4 to hard play, and he's also an easy level 4 to digivolve up into, making him a pretty decent card while fitting on theme with the typings that the deck wants. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Syakomon. So Syakomon is in the deck, again, like Tobiumon, not necessarily for any inheritable abilities that we're trying to gain off of this card, but as a good card to want to split apart because he has the blocker ability, and he's an easy card to digivolve up into, also having a low digivolution cost. And then I am going to be running 1 copy of Kumamon as that hybrid alternative win condition, just because if we're able to break all of the opponent's security and we have a tamer set up, then Kumamon is just one of the better cards to use to digivolve on top of that tamer and basically swing for the game with, as long as we have the memory to do so. But I do like Kumamon over something like Lobomon, just because most of the time we're only going to be using the card to swing for game with, but he also does have a nice win digivolve ability to try to help trash the opponent's inheritable sources and attack the opponent's inheritable sources to set up some other specific cards that we might want to think about using. But the main level 4 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the brand new Ebidramon. So this new version of Ebidramon is really good because his on-play ability states that one of our blue Digimon gains the blocker ability, allowing us to actually have some alternative extra lines of defense for the deck, and we can pair this up with our higher stage Digimon to make them blockers to try to wall the opponent out. Then on top of that, if he was played from our Digivolution source, which is ideally how we want to play our Digimon anyway, then we get to unsuspend that Digimon, not only acting as some good defense, but allowing us to have some good offensive plays available to us as well. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Whamon. So Whamon from BT7 is also another card to try to help us split apart our inheritable sources. So he's another card we want to split apart with our level 7, so that way we could try to flood and swarm the field even harder and try to trigger multiple different on-play abilities off as well. So he has the on-play ability to split apart a level 3 Digimon from one of our Digimon's Digivolution sources. Then we get to play a blue Digimon, it doesn't even specify what level, from our hands to the bottom of one of our Digimon's Digivolution sources, so that way we could try to keep one of our main stacks as full as we possibly can of inheritables to be able to split apart later. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Piranimon. So Piranimon just has the simple rush ability for us to use, so when he is split apart from our inheritable sources, then we could use this rush ability to add some extra aggro into the deck. But the main level 5 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the brand new MegaSeadramon. So MegaSeadramon is just a good card to, again, try to help us split our sources into extra Digimon the best that we can. He's going to natively split apart a blue level 3 Digimon for free, which again is ideally going to be our Crabmon, so that way our Crabmon can give jamming, or Gomamon, so that way we could get some extra card draw. Then on top of that, his inheritable ability is basically passing his native ability onto whatever level 6 that we're going to be using, or subsequently level 7, for more source splitting goodness of our level 3 blue Digimon. And then as far as our Mega level Digimon go, I'm going to be running 2 copies of MetalSeadramon. So MetalSeadramon is kind of a flex spot for the deck, but I do like his synergy that he has with Aegisdramon. So he himself has an on-play ability for us to take advantage of, splitting off of our Aegisdramon, and also spawning a level 6 body of being able to bounce 2 of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon back into their hand for some added control, while also being able to be a pretty decent aggressive card where he basically becomes unblockable against the opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources, which we do have a few ways to be able to trash their inheritable sources into the deck, or you could tech the deck to do more of that to make MetalSeadramon a little bit of a better card to use. But as far as the main level 6 of the deck goes, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the brand new Plesiomon. So the brand new Plesiomon is a pretty decent card because when we Digivolve up into him, we get to split apart a blue level 3 or a blue level 4 with aquatic, sea animals, or sea beast in its traits from its Digivolution source for free, so that way we again can just try to flood the field and get their on-play abilities off. So this is going to be a fantastic card to split apart our Ebidramon to be able to give our Plesiomon the blocker ability and unsuspend it. Then also on top of that, we get to reload his inheritable sources, so that way we could try to place a blue Digimon card from our hand underneath him to split apart later, and his inheritable ability is pretty good for our Aegisdramon to use it, just because when we're going to be splitting apart our Digimon, then we get to bounce one of the opponent's Digimon of the same level as the Digimon that we just split apart. So we have multiple different levels that we could split apart off of our Aegisdramon, so it just makes Plesiomon's ability actually pretty good at adding some extra control into the deck. And then the last Mega level Digimon and only level 7 of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Aegisdramon. So Aegisdramon is kind of the key center focal point on what the deck is all about, which is just trying to double down on splitting apart our inheritable sources. So he's just a good level 7 to use that's accompanying that, while also taking advantage of all of the different cards that we have in the deck. So he has a nice when Digivolving ability, where we get to play a blue level 3 or a Digimon with Seadramon in its name, aquatic, sea beast, or sea animal from in our traits from among our inheritable sources as a separate Digimon. So ideally we get to pick and choose which ones we want to separate, and a lot of our Digimon in the deck are fitting on theme type-wise with how the deck wants to play, so we can maximize on what we're able to split apart. Then, on top of that, he has an ability that triggers during the opponent's turn, where once per turn, when an opponent plays a Digimon, we get to take advantage of that by being able to activate his When Digivolving ability to split apart our inheritable sources even more with. And this combos very nicely with the Plesiomon, because the Plesiomon's inheritable ability is all turns, to be able to bounce the opponent's Digimon depending on what we're splitting apart off of our Aegisdramon, and that's just really powerful because we have the ability and capability to split apart anything from a level 6 and below. Then, as far as tamers go, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Davis. So Davis not only is going to be the memory fixing tamer to make sure that our memory is always going to be at 3, so we could ensure our plays are going to be as powerful as they possibly can be, but he also has a nice on-play ability that's adding some extra consistency into the deck by looking at the top 3 and adding a blue Digimon from among them into our hand, so we could try to find the parts and pieces that we need while having a good tamer set us up to make sure that we can make our power plays possible. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Ice Wall because this card is so good that we're only able to run 1 copy of it, and it's just in the deck to try to act as a good defensive tool to anti-tempo the opponent and buy us some extra time when the opponent is wanting to try to aggress, because its main ability states that all of the opponent's Digimon, doesn't necessarily matter if it's coming from their hand, coming out of raising, or coming off of a tamer, just all of their Digimon period gain this when attacking clause of losing 2 memory, essentially taxing each of their attacks to de-incentivizing them from attacking until the end of their next turn, and its security ability at worst is just gaining us some extra 2 memory to try to again anti-tempo the opponent. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Sourai. So Sourai is kind of a flex spot for the deck, and this could just be the removal tech in the deck, but I just figured off of our Digimon we already have so much bounce that we might as well be doing something else, and Sourai is actually pretty decent because it's helping with trashing the opponent's inheritable sources, so that way we could try to make cards like MetalSeadramon a little bit more effective. On top of the fact that it's also another fog effect for us to take advantage of to try to stop some of the opponent's potential aggro, so its main ability more specifically states that we trash the top 4 of one of the opponent's Digimon's Digivolution source, and then all of the opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources can't attack, which is pretty good. They could easily just Digivolve on top of their Digimon and then swing anyway, so it is kind of like Hexablaumon in option form, but the fact that they have to do that is still just pretty powerful to, again, try to anti-tempo the opponent. With its security ability also being a nice security threat, activating its main to, again, try to stop some of the opponent's potential aggro. And then the last option card and last card of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Blue Memory Boost for some more consistency. So like Davis, it's just allowing us to look at the top 4 for a blue Digimon and add it to our hand. Then it's going to go into the battle area to use its secondary main of Delay at a later turn to be able to gain us 2 memory to ensure that we are going to be able to make our power plays as best as we possibly can. With at worst the security ability making sure that this card's going to go into the battle area, so we could then use the Delay again for that 2 memory, making it a pretty decent card to allow us to make more powerful plays possible. But as far as some basic playlines and combo play that this deck has, there's just a decent amount that this deck is able to do. So ideally, we're going to try to stick to the brand new EX3 cards and the new EX3 line to be able to utilize the deck the way it's supposed to be intended and a lot of our combo plays. So we're going to want to try to Digivolve in Raising into Crabmon, and then Crabmon into Ebidramon, so that way we could either move out with our Ebidramon or Digivolve in Raising into our MegaSeadramon. So if we do line up this deck particularly when we move out, so assuming if we have at least 2 to 3 memory and a Davis on the field, that's when the true power of this deck shows. So we would start off at 3 memory assuming our Davis is on the field, then we're going to swing with our MegaSeadramon, and then MegaSeadramon's ability will split apart the Crabmon, so that way when we split apart the Crabmon, that's going to make the MegaSeadramon swing safe because he's going to gain jamming while also spawning that level 3 body. Then we are going to gain a memory because of Bukamon for that action, and then go down to 1 into our Plesiomon. And then Plesiomon is going to be really powerful because it's going to use its effect to split apart the Ebidramon. So the Ebidramon's effect will basically make it so that our Plesiomon will unsuspend itself and gain the blocker ability. So that way we could then go into our Aegisdramon for 4, putting them at 3, in case they have a memory fixing tamer, and then our Aegisdramon is going to split apart another Digimon. So the Plesiomon can help set up any of our other on-play effects that we want to trigger, so we could try to use Gomamon to draw some extra cards, we could use Piranimon to split apart for some extra rush, or we could use Whamon to use its on-play ability to split apart more inheritable sources. But I find that the best target in this situation off of the lowest amount of resources is actually going to be the MetalSeadramon, so that way we have some more added control into the deck available to us, just because Plesiomon is going to put another Digimon underneath when we're splitting apart. So that way when we go into Aegisdramon, it's going to be a blocker that's unsuspended and allows us to play that MegaSeadramon to try to control the opponent's field or be another really decent card to think about trying to aggress with, just because he could be unblockable. So even though we didn't do a whole lot of damage, just the fact that we could easily spawn 3 extra bodies is very, very powerful depending on what the cards that we're using are and how we're going to be using them. But as far as what some of the other cards in the deck are trying to do is, well, they're just trying to be supportive tools to enhance our plays. So if we don't necessarily have all of these exact pieces, then we still could try to do some very powerful things, like splitting apart ModokiBetamon or Syakomon to try to get a floodgate back onto the field to stop and limit some of the opponent's actions. We could try to use Tobiumon to use as a good stepping stool, not only just to try to make our evolution super cheap and easy, but to also use to try to have another level 4 body to split out with, just because it's fitting on brand with the deck. And similarly, we also have Coelamon to act as another Digimon to split apart and reuse his blocker ability, while also being, again, another tempo efficient stepping stool to be able to get into our higher stages with. So depending on what your stack is, you kind of have to read what abilities you have access to and what you're able to do, which might be the hardest part of the deck. But like I stated, the intended evolution line is trying to use the new EX3 cards to try to make this process a little bit easier. That's why Davis and Blue Memory Boost are super important for the deck, so that way we could try to find all of the parts and pieces that we need to be able to get ourselves into the best possible position that we can. And this is not even taking into account Aegisdramon's ability when the opponent is going to be playing their Digimon. So whether it's going to be from Digicross or they're just forced to hard play a rookie or something for its on play ability, then Aegisdramon is also going to allow us to try to split apart our inheritable sources even more, on top of various other inheritable abilities that he might have attached to him when our turn does come around. And then there's still just a whole bunch of different ways to approach the deck, just because the core theme of being able to split apart our inheritable sources can lead into some very powerful sub-themes. So you don't necessarily have to play along with the whole aquatic and sea animal sub-theme that the deck naturally wants to lean into, and instead we could double down on some source removal to try to remove their inheritable sources and stop some of their abilities. So source removal has a decent amount of support, and we do have a wide variety of different cards that we could use to best accommodate this. So we could use something like Gomamon as an inheritable we could split apart to start attacking the opponent's sources. Or we could even use something like Snow Agumon to be able to tax the opponent's Digivolutions when they don't have any sources. Then we do have just a Dramon as another sub-theme to think about leaning into, just because Aegisdramon is, well, a Dramon on top of Seadramon. So we could play something like a Dracomon to add to the deck's overall consistency and play more into the Dramon focus. On top of that, we do have Coelamon as a security threat and an on-play ability that we could trigger, while again fitting on theme with how Dramons want to play around with. Or if you want to be cute and cheeky with how you want to play aquatics and some source removal, then we also have Submarinemon as a really decent card to think about utilizing, just because we could try to use the armor perch to our benefit to pop stronger Digimon out of him or off of underneath him than what normally would be allowed because of how this deck wants to play. Or if you're just looking for some tempo and you don't necessarily care about your other level 5s, then we could just use something like Divermon as a good tempo tool. But we do have various other level 5s that we could think about utilizing, again, depending on what you're trying to build and how you're trying to build it. So I'm going to be highlighting Chimeramon just because we are a flood style of deck, and Chimeramon with a field of level 4s can take advantage of them to be able to climb our stages super easily, on top of being another aggressive Digimon because of the DNA Digivolution. And then depending on our level 5s, we also have a couple of different supporting level 6s that we could think about running. So if you want to lean more into Whamon, then we can run King Whamon as a way to better use that Whamon. On top of the fact that if we do want to use Piranimon, then similarly we have Metal Piranimon as a way to be able to better use that card. Or if you're just looking for something generic and pretty solid, we do have the Dramon sub-focus that I mentioned earlier, with Slayerdramon as a fantastic card for us to use, and we even have some blue Wingdramons that we could use, whether it's going to be the blocker one or it's going to be the brand new one that adds evade. It doesn't necessarily matter, it's just the fact that we have all of these different level 5s and 6s to think about utilizing depending on your approach to the deck. Then, as far as some really good options go, we do have Howling Memory Boost and various other cards to help attack the opponent's inheritable sources to try to stun them to make their Digimon as useless as we could possibly make them. Then we do have other cards to help separate our Digimon's inheritable sources. So we do have Tidal Wave and we do have Kaisernail as two really powerful options to do this with. Then we do just have some really good blue generic staples that we could think about using. So Hammer Spark allows us to gain some extra tempo and possibly take away some tempo from the opponent, on top of a slew of different removal options that all are trying to bounce or tuck the opponent's Digimon depending on the option you're using. Then we do have a couple of other different tamers that we could think about incorporating into the deck. Sora and Joe is going to be the highlight here just because if we're already trying to attack the opponent's inheritables, then this is one of the best cards to do that with and have some extra benefit for the opponent having a Digimon with no inheritables, making it one of the easier duo tamers to actually gain some extra memory from. But the tamer slots, there still are just a couple of different other tamers that we could think about using. Again, all depending on your build and what you're trying to gain out of the deck. On top of, we do have the ability to want to run a supporting level 7, so that way we could try to get up into our Aegisdramon, split apart our MetalSeadramon, and then Digivolve into another level 7, so we could try to be hyper aggressive with that supporting level 7 if you really wanted to. But all of this just shows that there is still a lot of customization and flexibility inside of this type of a deck. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.